Welcome back. Today, we're diving into a source that makes a pretty extraordinary claim about the Bible, one that, if true, could really change how we think about history itself. So, let's just start with the big question at the heart of it all. Is it even possible for major historical events to be written down with specific details long before they ever happen?
Well, the text we're looking at doesn't hesitate. It gives a very clear answer: yes, absolutely. It argues the Bible contains what it calls history written in advance. And this idea is the key to everything else we're going to talk about.
So, what exactly do we mean by fulfilled prophecy? According to this source, we're not talking about vague predictions you might find in a fortune cookie. No, this is defined as super specific, detailed events that were written down and then, later on, happen exactly as described. The source presents this as a kind of verifiable proof.
And the sheer scale of this claim is, well, it's pretty mind-boggling. The source says that out of about 2,500 prophecies in the Bible, something like 2,000 of them have already come true, right down to the letter. It's that huge number, it argues, that makes the case so compelling.
Okay, so a claim that big needs some serious backup, right? So let's look at the specific historical examples the source points to as its evidence for history being written before it actually unfolded. The first big example it gives revolves around a guy named Cyrus. And what's wild about this verse from Isaiah is that it doesn't just predict something will happen, it actually names the person who's going to do it. And this is where the timeline really gets interesting. The source points out that this prophecy, naming Cyrus, was written way back around 700 BC. But here's the kicker: Cyrus himself, he doesn't even become king until 559 BC. That's over 100 years later. And the actual thing he was prophesied to do, issue the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, doesn't happen until 538 BC. We're talking about a gap of about 160 years. That's a long time. So you gotta ask, what are the odds of that happening by sheer luck? I mean, naming a specific person and what they'll do over 150 years in the future? Well, the source cites a calculation that puts the probability at 1 in a quadrillion. That's a 1 with 15 zeros after it. Just an astronomical number. Now, if you thought that was specific, the next example the source gives is even more like a precision-timed clock. It points to a prophecy in the book of Daniel. Step 1, you can see it there. A prediction that exactly 483 years would pass from a specific command to rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah would appear. Step 2, that's when the clock starts ticking. King Artaxerxes gives that command in 458 BC. And then step 3, 483 years later, right on schedule, according to the source, the ministry of Jesus begins. It's presented as this incredibly precise timeline, laid out almost 5 centuries in advance. Okay, so after laying out these historical examples as a kind of proof, the source pivots. It moves from prophecies it claims are already fulfilled to prophecies about the future, specifically about what it calls the end times. And this next whole section is really framed around a question that Jesus' own disciples asked him. They basically said, what are the signs we should be looking for? How will we know the end of the age is coming? And his answer is what the source material unpacks for us here. So what are these signs? The source pulls out 5 big categories. First, spiritual deception. Lots of false teachers and false messiahs popping up. Second, global turmoil. And this is a big one. Wars, famines, diseases, and earthquakes. Third, what you could call a social breakdown, with lawlessness and betrayal on the rise, and people's love for one another growing cold. Fourth, persecution of believers. And then the fifth and final sign, the message of the gospel being preached to the whole world. Now, this is a really, really crucial point the source makes. It acknowledges, hey, wars and earthquakes, famines, these things have always been a part of human history, so that's not the sign. The sign, it argues, is their intensification. It's that these things will start happening more often and with greater intensity, like birth pains getting closer and closer together. And that metaphor, that idea of birth pains, is pulled right from the text. This verse is used to frame all of those escalating signs, the wars, the famines, as just the beginning of something much bigger. They're not the main event, just the start of it. So all of this leads to the final, and maybe the most provocative part of the source material. It basically asks the question, given all these signs, could we be living in those times right now? Could we be what it calls the final generation? To get to that answer, the source zooms in on how it interprets 3 key statements. First up is the parable of the fig tree, which it reads as a clear instruction. When you see all these signs happening at once, you know the end is close. Second, there's the phrase, this generation, which the source interprets to mean that one single generation will actually see all of these things happen. But third, and this is critical, the text also says no one knows the day or hour. So the takeaway isn't about setting a date, but about being ready.
And that's really the bottom line. The source doesn't conclude by pointing to a specific date on a calendar, not at all. Instead, it ends with a call to action, to be a watchful generation, to pay attention to what's happening in the world and live in a state of readiness for these events it says were foretold.
And this is the verse that really ties that whole idea together. It's presented in the text as this statement of certainty, that once this cascade of signs begins, the whole sequence will wrap up within the lifespan of the generation that sees it start.
And so we're left with this pretty massive question to think about. Whether you buy into the source's claims or not, just the idea of a predetermined future, it forces you to look at the present in a different way. I mean, what changes if you believe history isn't just a series of random events, but is actually following a script? It's definitely something to chew on.